I want to start with a scenario that seems incredibly simple, but I have a feeling is actually, well, the scene of a crime.
Okay.
You're in a relationship, it's Friday night, you ask where should we go for dinner, and the other person sighs and says, "Oh, I don't care, you pick."
The I'm easy trap.
Exactly. So you suggest Italian, they make a face, you suggest sushi, they say, we just had that last week." 20 minutes later, you're exhausted, you're anxious, and you end up ordering the exact thing they wanted all along.
But somehow you feel responsible for it.
Yes, it's this tiny microcosm of the invisible power architecture in a relationship.
It absolutely is. And that's what we're digging into today.
That's right. We aren't talking about the screaming matches or the obvious power struggles. We're talking about the quiet mechanics of who actually holds the cards. We've got a stack of research here from 1930s sociology all the way to modern neurobiology, and it suggests power isn't about who makes more money or who's the loudest,
A lot of the time it's about who cares the least.
which is a pretty depressing thought to kick things off with. But before we get there, we should probably define our terms. The word power in a relationship,
Right.
it feels dirty.
It does. It feels like if you have to talk about power, then the love is already gone.
Right.
But that's a common misconception. The research really disagrees. I mean, power is just physics. It's the capacity to influence. If you're a parent and you convince your toddler to put on their shoes, that's power. If you get your partner to watch a sci-fi movie instead of a rom-com, that's power. It's neutral.
It's just inevitable.
It's inevitable. The problem isn't that power exists
It's how it's distributed.
and how it gets weaponized. The sources make this really rigorous distinction between power, which is about influence, collaboration, and control. Control is the exertion of authority to override someone else's autonomy. Power says, I have a preference. Control says, you don't get to have one.
Okay, so let's look at the physics of this. I found this one concept in the reading, the principle of least interest, and I have to say, it felt like a personal attack.
It hits hard, doesn't it? This comes from a sociologist named Willard Waller, writing all the way back in 1938. He was just looking at dating dynamics. And he drops this bomb. The person who is least interested in continuing the relationship has the most power.
It's the whole cool girl trope,
Hmm.
or the bad boy who won't commit.
It's leverage. I mean, think about a salary negotiation. If you are desperate for a job and the employer has 10 other good candidates, they set the terms.
Of course.
But if you have 3 other offers and you don't really need this job, well, you name your price. Waller argued that relationships operate on a similar market dynamic. If I'm willing to walk away and you aren't, you will be the one compromising. You will be the one changing your behavior to keep me.
So that implies that the most loving person or the most invested person is automatically the most vulnerable.
In a structural sense, yes. The partner with the higher emotional dependency has lower bargaining power.
But here's where the research took a turn that it just really rattled me. Because you'd think, logically, if I'm in a relationship where the other person is pulling away, where they hold all the cards because they care less, my brain would say, hey, bad deal, abort mission.
The rational response, right? Cut your losses.
But that is not what happens.
No. The biology does something.
Yeah.
Well, something fascinating and cruel. We looked at a study on stress responses and oxytocin. Now, we usually think of oxytocin as the cuddle hormone.
Right, the bonding chemical, that warm, fuzzy feeling.
It is. But this study found that oxytocin is also released in response to relational stress. When you feel that gap widening, when you feel your partner pulling away, your brain floods you with oxytocin.
Wait a minute. So the stress of them leaving makes my brain release a chemical that makes me feel more bonded to them.
It triggers what they call a tend-and-befriend response. Your biology is screaming, bridge the gap, fix this, try harder. So while the less interested partner is cool and detached, holding all the power, the more invested partner is literally being drugged by their own brain to work overtime to save the connection.
That is a massive evolutionary design flaw. It explains so much about why people stay in one-sided relationships for years. You're not just fighting your partner's apathy, you're fighting your own neurochemistry.
It's a feedback loop. The more you chase, the more power you give away. The more power they have, the less they might respect you, the more they pull away.
And the more oxytocin you produce to try and fix it, wow.
It's a trap.
Okay, so if that's the biological trap, let's talk about the economic one. We always assume power comes from money. You know, the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules.
And that's resource theory. And to be fair, it's statistically valid. Income, education, status, they do correlate with decision-making power. But it's too simple. It doesn't explain why you sometimes see unemployed partners completely dominating high-earning spouses.
Right, and that's where this social exchange theory thing comes in, the comparison level for alternatives, CLOL.
Right, and this is the internal math we all do, usually without realizing it. The formula is basically your relationship outcome minus your cult equals your dependence.
Okay, break that down for us non-math majors.
You look at your current relationship, the good, the bad.
Yeah.
That's your outcome. Then you compare it to what you think your alternative reality would be. What would my life look like if I left? Could I find someone better? Would I actually be happy alone? That's your cult,
So if I have high self-esteem, I like being single, I know I'd be fine, my CLOL is high.
which means your dependence is low. You stay because you want to, not because you have to. But if you believe you have no other options, maybe you're financially trapped or you have low self-worth and think nobody else would want me, your cult is basically zero. Your dependence is 100%.
And that is when you start to just capitulate.
That's when you capitulate. A millionaire who's terrified of being alone has less actual power than a broke person who loves their own company. It's about the perception of options.
I want to pivot this to the darker side of the spectrum. We've established that imbalances happen, but there's a line where imbalance becomes abuse. And the sources get very specific about the difference between a dominant personality and dominating behavior.
And that's a really key distinction because we often confuse assertiveness with control.
Mm.
A dominant personality, a type A person, can be incredibly healthy. They're decisive. They initiate things. I book the tickets or I handle the insurance. That's leadership.
That's functional. I would love it if someone else handled the insurance.
We all would. But
Yeah.
the key there is that healthy dominance invites participation. I'm thinking of doing it this way. Does that work for you? Dominating behavior, on the other hand, it shuts down participation. It's restrictive. And when that becomes a pattern, we're in the realm of coercive control.
The list of tactics here was chilling. Some are so subtle. I mean, we all know about isolation keeping you from friends, but the one that really stood out was intermittent reinforcement.
This is maybe the most psychological of the tactics. It links right back to that addiction mechanic we talked about. Think about a slot machine. If you pulled the lever and lost every single time, you just walk away.
It's boring.
Exactly. But if you win sometimes, but you never know when, you will sit there for hours.
Yeah.
That's intermittent reinforcement. In a controlling relationship, the partner isn't awful 100% of the time. That would be easy to leave. Instead, they cycle between what some call bliss and silence.
So they shower you with love and affection, and then suddenly, for no reason, they withdraw.
And that withdrawal creates a dopamine crash in your brain. You become obsessed with getting the good version of them back. You start monitoring your own behavior, thinking, if I just say the right thing, if I just do the right thing, I'll hit the jackpot again.
That phrase from the source text, walking on eggshells, it was presented as the ultimate diagnostic tool.
It is the single most reliable indicator that you've lost your autonomy. If you are constantly scanning your partner's mood to figure out if you're safe, if you're allowed to be happy, the power dynamic has collapsed into control.
We can't talk about power structures without talking about the structural elephant in the room, gender. Modern couples, we like to think we're 50-50.
We split the bill on the first date. We're progressive.
Right. But the research suggests there's a lot of hidden power still operating in the background.
Hidden power is the perfect term. It operates below the level of conscious decision-making. It's just the way things are.
The study on cohabiting couples was a perfect example. These are couples living together, not married. You'd assume they're pretty modern.
Right. This research found that even in these incomplete institutions, where you don't have traditional vows dictating roles, men often retain what's called manifest power over the relationship's future.
The gatekeeper role.
Precisely. The study showed that women often initiate the let's move in together talk.
Yeah.
But it's usually framed very pragmatically, my lease is up, or it just makes financial sense. But the next step, marriage, that's almost exclusively a male prerogative,
The proposal.
the proposal. And here's the detail that really struck me. When the researchers asked the men in the study how they would feel if a woman proposed to them, they didn't just say they wouldn't like it.
What they do.
They laughed.
They laughed.
It was this visceral reaction. They treated it as a joke. And the analysis was that the laughter itself is a defense mechanism. By treating female agency in that domain as ridiculous, they resecure their own position as the one who decides if and when the relationship becomes permanent.
Wow. It's the ultimate pocket veto. She can push for the apartment key, but he holds the ring. And as long as he holds the ring, he dictates the timeline.
And that timeline dictates the power dynamic. If one person is always waiting to be asked, they're in a subordinate position no matter how much money they make.
This spills over into conflict too, right? The sources mention direct versus indirect styles.
Yes, drawing on French and Raven's work. Statistically, in heterosexual relationships, men are more likely to use direct, bilateral strategies. I want this, let's negotiate. Women, on the other hand, are more likely to use indirect or unilateral strategies. So, hinting, withdrawing, or just doing something themselves without asking.
Which makes sense if you feel like you don't have the authority to demand things directly. You sort of become a guerrilla fighter because you can't win a frontal assault.
Exactly. Directness is a privilege of those who feel entitled to be heard.
Okay, so we've painted a fairly grim picture. We have biological traps, economic leverage, coercive gambling, and these gender scripts that are impossible to kill. How do we fix this? How do we rebalance the scales without, blowing up the whole relationship?
First, and it's the most important part, the safety warning. We have to be crystal clear. If you identified with that coercive control section, the fear, the surveillance, the isolation, you cannot strategy your way out of that. You don't rebalance an abuser. In those cases, the only move is a safe exit plan.
Understood. So these tools are for the lopsided relationship, not the dangerous one.
Correct. For the lopsided relationship, the first step is boundaries. But the sources are specific. We need clear boundaries, not rigid, which are just walls or diffuse.
And I feel like most of us fall into that diffuse category, the people-pleaser mode.
That's where you override your own needs to keep the peace. And the biggest symptom of a diffuse boundary is over-explaining.
Oh, I am so guilty of this. If I have to say no to something, I give like a 5-minute speech about why, with footnotes.
And what you're doing psychologically is you're asking for permission to have your own boundary. When you say, I can't come because I'm tired and my boss was mean and I have a headache, you're presenting evidence to a judge, hoping they'll grant you a verdict of not guilty.
Oof. That's...
A clear boundary doesn't ask for a verdict. It states a fact. I can't make it tonight. I need to rest. Full stop. It feels really uncomfortable at first, but omitting the justification is a power move. It signals that your needs are valid just because they're yours.
It reclaims authority over your own time and energy. What about in the middle of a fight? The Gottman method came up as the gold standard here.
The Gottmans are brilliant. Their #1 tool for power balancing is what they call the softened startup.
Which is the opposite of how I usually start arguments, which is generally, you did it again.
You never, you always.
Right.
Those are attacks. And an attack triggers a defense. The power struggle begins right there. A softened startup flips the script. It starts with I, as in, I feel overwhelmed when the kitchen is messy and I need some help.
It shifts the whole dynamic from me versus you to us versus the problem.
Exactly. But there's a second part to this that the research suggests is maybe the biggest predictor of divorce. It's the ability to accept influence.
Which means what? Just doing what you're told.
No, it means letting your partner's perspective and needs genuinely impact your decision-making. And statistically, this is a gendered issue. In long-term studies, women are generally pretty good at accepting influence from men. But men who cannot accept influence from their female partners, who see every suggestion as a threat to their autonomy, have an 81% probability of the relationship ending.
81%.
It's a massive number. The inability to say, you know what, that's a good point, let's do it your way, is a relationship killer. True power, in a healthy sense, is secure enough to yield.
That reminds me of the Stanford research on using power for good.
Yes. The idea that if you actually have power, the most effective way to use it is to empower the other person, using deference as a strategy.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive.
It does. We think power looks like dominance. But if you are constantly steering the ship, you create a passenger. If you step back, if you ask for help, if you admit you don't know, if you hand over the wheel, you create a co-captain. You actually reduce that Kelton disparity because the other person feels valued and invested.
So stopping the micromanagement isn't just about saving your own energy. It's about strategically increasing your partner's investment.
Exactly. You move from a dictatorship to a partnership.
I think that's the big takeaway. Power isn't evil. It's just energy. It's physics. But you have to be awake at the wheel to make sure that energy is flowing both ways.
And you have to be willing to consciously rewrite those invisible scripts, the biology, the gender norms that try to push us back into those old, unbalanced hierarchies.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought, and it circles back to that terrifying biological trap we started with. the oxytocin response.
The tend and befriend trap.
If you are listening to this and you feel like you are the only one working on your relationship, if you are the one always chasing, always fixing, always trying to earn your place, I want you to ask yourself, is this love? Or is your brain just drugging you to keep you compliant in a power dynamic that requires you to erase yourself to maintain it?
That is the question that changes everything.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.